This is Talk Over Tea,
a place for a casual conversation about life in local government.
With Kassandra
and Claudel Frederic,
elected officials from the city of Amesbury, Massachusetts.
Relax with us for a moment. The tea is hot.
Welcome back. We are here for Talk Over Tea.
We are back.
And I am so excited for our conversation today.
Yes, today definitely is a good one, and I am definitely looking forward to it as well.
We have a listener-generated topic. Someone asked if we could talk about walkable cities, and this is something that I love. I could talk about for hours. So we're going to stick to our goal of a shorter episode for everybody.
I'll try to make sure we don't end up in an hour.
Yeah. But there's so much to say about it. So there were some great questions about what we think of walkable cities, who's doing it well, what our vision is for Amesbury to be more walkable. Right. And I think we'll just, we'll dive right in.
Yeah,
how's
definitely.
that? So when I saw the question, I was brought back to a guest speaker that we had in Amesbury years ago. I was the Chamber of Commerce director, and the Carriage Museum had Jeff Speck come and do a presentation in City Hall. And he wrote the book, The Walkable City, and is sort of like the guy to talk about walkable cities. He is actually from Massachusetts. I don't know if he still lives in Massachusetts, but was nearby, and someone with the museum had reached out to him and gotten him to come in and do a presentation. He spent a little bit of time in Amesbury to give us a little bit of personalized feedback, and I know he did sort of a dashboard review, and the talk is actually recorded by ACTV, our local cable television, and available to watch. So I went right back and pulled up the link, and I sent it to Claudel, and I said, we have to do this episode, but you have homework to do.
Oh, yeah.
So did you go back and watch it?
Yep. I did watch the video, and I also did watch his TED Talk as well. And I found a lot of the things that he was saying interesting and of course relatable, and some of the things I didn't even think about. I'm like, wow, I didn't notice this actually does make it feel more like a walkable city. Yeah, if we have these things. But I thought he was amazing. Yeah, I love that talk. I actually have listened to it more than once. I'm curious what your just overall sort of takeaway was from it about a walkable city. What did you I really like his approach on how he determined, for example, I'll speak about Lowell because that's what he spoke about, how he determined a walkable city there and how he kind of helped develop what Lowell has. He didn't just kind of stay somewhere else to do this. He lived in Lowell for a little while, to kind of really see what the in and outs is, walking the city, kind of see where the trouble parts are, and kind of really engage with the community to determine what a walkable city is. Yeah. And it's more than just getting out and being able to walk. It's a feeling, it's engagement. It's just so much, even art. He speaks about murals, and I feel like us having more murals would be awesome, because it's when you walk, you don't necessarily want your walk to be super fast, right? Right. You want to kind of have something to look at, right? So that caught my attention. Yeah. I really appreciated his perspective on it. I think that so he identifies 4 things you need to have in place and do simultaneously to have a walkable city. Yep. So they are that you need to have a reason to go for a walk, right? There has to be a proper reason. And then the walk needs to be comfortable, safe, and interesting. Yep. And I think that is more than what most people think of when they say, well, I want to live in a walkable city. I think a lot of people just want to see a sidewalk in front of their house and they want it to be in good condition. And actually in the whole, I don't know if it was an hour-long presentation that he did, he never talked about pavement condition. Yeah. Right? He never talked about the actual surface of the walk. There's so many other things that go into it. Now, having it be a safe walk,
of course, means that you can safely navigate the sidewalk, but there's so many other things to having it be safe. He talks about, the speed that the vehicles are traveling, the barriers between the cars and the pedestrians, bike lanes, so street trees, barriers, lamp posts, benches, things like that.
Right.
But so when somebody thinks like, I want to live in a walkable place, again, I think a lot of people just think, well, I want to have access to a sidewalk,
right.
and that's not necessarily the end all be all. It's maybe you do need a sidewalk, maybe you don't, but there's so many other pieces to that, which I thought was really interesting and something for us to keep in mind
right.
when we think about whether we are a walkable city or not.
Now, he did mention something else that was pretty cool when it comes to like the speed limit, right? I loved that. I didn't even think about this part, right? I think the example what he used was Pond Street. He was talking about how Pond Street's a pretty small street, right? But there's a yellow line down the middle. He said if there was no yellow line, people would automatically go slower.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street, but people would automatically go slower.
Right.
And it's true because I've done that myself.
Yeah. Well, they're afraid of, being hit or navigating oncoming traffic.
And same thing with like wider streets. I hear people talk about wanting wider streets all the time, but that's not going to slow things down. That's just going to get people to drive faster.
Yeah.
I do it.
Yeah.
I know. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's like having wider streets. It's not necessarily the best thing if you want a walkable city.
Right.
Yeah,
there's so many things you can find out there, and like certainly I'm not the expert on this, and
right.
somebody like Jeff is, but you can look up things like road diets or skinny streets or smart streets. Smart streets, is that the word? There's all different sort of philosophies on how to give yourself narrow travel lanes, which will impact the way vehicles are sort of behaving on the street, and that he really advocates for a 10-foot travel lane. A lot of folks will otherwise argue for a 12-foot travel lane. And one of the things when you said speed limit that he talks about is sort of the safety for a pedestrian in an area that is 20 miles per hour versus 30 miles per hour, and how you design the street for the speed at which you want the vehicle to travel, right? So you could mark a road 20 miles per hour, but it could feel safe for the driver to be going 40. And so when you put in those street trees and benches and, lamps and other things,
those barriers,
it's
right?
sort of, you're right, it makes the street feel more narrow, and it makes them feel like, oh, I need to drive slower here. And so those are the things that I keep in mind as I'm doing our work and we're looking at the streets that we are designing or that we are restriping. We just did striping this year that hadn't been done in a long time. And I got emails from constituents right away that said, just the striping made the traffic in my neighborhood slow down, because it does sort of give this perimeter, to a driver to feel like, oh, okay, I belong, just in this travel lane, and they have a little less freedom.
So bike lanes.
Yeah.
Bike lanes are awesome to have. He mentioned that. And I think that's very true as well.
Yeah.
Something else that he mentioned that caught my attention, and you mentioned it as well. Like, obviously, you're talking about the trees, the barriers, and all that. He said something about having the walk be just as interesting as the drive.
Right.
It's like you drive, you definitely want something to look at while you drive. Like, especially if you're driving somewhere you don't know. You want what you would call a nice view, like some trees, like, I don't know, restaurants, like, people eating on the sidewalk, like make the walk just as interesting as the drive. I felt like, I was like, wow, we kind of have that going on in our downtown right now. And our walkable score is 91.
It's 91?
Yeah.
I assume that's out of 100.
Yes, out of 100.
Wow.
Yeah.
He actually, in his presentations, even in the TED Talk, uses a community that's right next door to us as an example, which is really interesting. He talks about how New England cities like ours naturally have this, sort of good bones for being a walkable city, right? We have small blocks, we have narrow streets. They started as cow paths, right? So, the more lanes you have, the more vehicular friendly you are, the less pedestrian friendly you are. So our one-way streets are just single lanes. Even if you think about some of our neighboring communities, they might have one-way streets in their downtown, but they're two lanes.
Yeah.
So I'm impressed
like a
by our
highway.
walkability score.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah. It's, sort of the goal and sort of the conversation overall about being Walkable City is that we want to get people out of their cars, right? We've built our cities recently, over the last over 100 years to be more vehicular friendly. People need a car as they get farther from the city. They get farther from work. We put zoning in place. We say we want business. I think we've even talked about this before. You want, your businesses over here. You want your housing over here. We don't really want those to be mixed. People get upset when we say we're putting a business in next door. But
we kind of need that.
We
though.
need
that
that
integration.
Integration. Yeah. One of the slides he has is about how when you're zoning, you want it to look more like confetti than sort of, really sort of segregated.
He also mentioned that it's like a sense of security too.
Yeah.
It's kind of like your downtown. It's like when it shuts down, then it's just dead. If there's no houses, there's nobody really watching over your downtown.
Right.
And that made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
he called it supervision, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. So that is huge.
Yeah.
And diversity. We did not talk about that. And when I speak about diversity in regards to a walkable city, like he mentioned, like just having churches, like schools, parks, restaurants, like all those things in walkable distance, like a nice, diverse, walkable community.
Yeah. That's that, like having a reason.
Right.
To, there's got to be a reason for the walk. And I think, there's a difference between going for a walk to recreate, right? Like I'm going to go out for exercise. I need to go for a walk for 20 minutes versus walking for your day-to-day, sort of activity. You're getting your, chores and your, doing things for day-to-day life, which is having a place to worship, being able to walk to work, being able to walk to school, being able to go to the store and having all of that within walking distance. Yeah. And that's really what we mean when we say a walkable city. Yes. So now you're seeing, certainly in Amesbury, we've opened our code, sort of zoning and ordinances and rewritten a lot of things recently. And we are trying to do a lot more mixed use. We're trying to do a lot of infill development and trying to sort of undo some of what the zoning in the last, few decades has done. To really create that separation of work and life and, school and sort of reintegrate that for everybody.
The confetti.
We're trying to create that confetti map. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, absolutely. So I loved Jeff Speck's, presentation. I recommend everybody go out and watch it. It doesn't matter if you live in Amesbury or not. Right. He's a great resource. Again, he's got a book out. And TED Talks, and he did this. You can just Google Amesbury. I think just Google Amesbury Jeff Speck, and you'll find our ACTV video, which is great. I think it's actually on Google now too. Yeah. So yeah, really informative. It's the type of stuff that I've been working on really for a while. I saw that presentation live. I was in the audience in 2015, I think. And even before that, I worked at Clark University. And they had an alum who had come in to do a presentation. They were associated with, I think it's Project for Public Spaces, and they focused on placemaking. And that's that sort of like making it interesting, again, sort of making it interesting, making it enjoyable, having sort of things to do. They operate off of the power of 10, that in a space, sort of a public space like that, people need to have sort of 10 reasons to be there. It could be to sit, it could be to eat, it could be to meet somebody, could be to look at art, but having sort of 10 things to do or 10 reasons to be there creates a robust and sort of vibrant public space. Yeah. And I've always kept that in mind. I happened to help plan the event, but I really took that away. And I've used all of these things as I've done our work here in the city. When I was the chamber director, I sort of took ownership over Market Square. If you think about Market Square, there's benches on the edge, sort of around the circumference of Market Square, and they all used to face the street. They all faced traffic. Yep. And when I was the chamber director, I worked with our public works staff to turn them around. Okay. Because you were starting to see families come in with strollers and kids, and they weren't sitting on the benches because they couldn't put the stroller in front of them.
Makes sense.
Right? They couldn't let the kids run around. You started to see staff trying to take a lunch break and wanting to sit outside in the square, but they were all sort of hovering on the rock wall, in front of the main building there. And so, I just watched it for a while from my window, and I thought, if all of those benches were turned around, everyone could sit in them.
And that's what they do now.
And now they do, right? So it's sort of creating those spaces for people to actually use and giving them a reason to. And you just sort of layer on. At the time we had cornhole boards out front. We've done public pianos. We've done it just gets more and more people to come out and find a reason to go for that walk, to get down there, to check out what's going on, to sit and spend some time. So those two things for me, those have been two events and programs that have been like really formative in how I think about our work. Certainly have more to do. Bike lanes.
Yeah.
He gave some really good ideas for bike lanes and spaces that we could just work them in with paint.
Yep.
And after watching it, I thought I got to bring it back to the staff, and I need to make everybody watch this.
Yeah, no, it's good. It opens your eyes and your mind to like the possibilities of a more walkable Amesbury.
Yeah, I think everyone sort of taking away those four things is great for us to think about as to whether we are walkable or how to improve the walkability. And they in general do build around downtowns, but we certainly know there's other areas of town that are not as walkable.
Yes.
But if you are walking distance to that city center, that's sort of, what matters. So I'm curious if you can think of other cities or towns that you've been to that are doing that, that are doing it well, that have good examples. I don't know if you drive around like I do and I take pictures like, that's a great sign. That's good landscaping,
So when I thought about it, I was like, oh, wow, this seems like a really walkable community. And then when I looked at the walking score, I was like, maybe not. So what I think versus the scores here.
But why do you think that? What stood out about that community?
Yeah, so what stood out to me was just how vibrant the community was, like the amount of people that were out there walking on a regular basis. But I think about it now, it's because there are a lot of tourists that kind of go there. And I'm speaking like about Portland, Maine.
Oh, okay.
So I felt like it was a pretty walkable community, but it is a lot of shops and just restaurants. Not so much art, but I feel like just the downtown itself, I feel like the cobblestones and stuff like that kind of gives this art feel.
Yeah.
So I feel like I like what they have going on. And there's days that I'm like, wow, Amesbury kind of feels like a downtown Portland, Maine or something like that. But I feel like we just have a lot more to offer, like the art and all these things.
Yeah. The cobblestones is an interesting point. One of the things that Jeff points out is history. And that history, even in the Power of 10 and placemaking, it can be one of the reasons people go, right? To sort of learn more and experience the history of the area, that sort of sense of place. So there's obviously a history to the downtown Portland.
Yeah.
And, how it the industries that used to be there, how it was built and all of that. And some cities do a really good job with wayfinding and signage and sort of telling that story.
Yeah.
I can't think of one right now that has great signage. I think Salem has pretty good signage. So when I think of other cities that are doing it well, that was one of the questions from our listeners, like who's the gold standard? I think it's hard to find a gold standard. We're all, we're always evolving in this area. There's like I said, even in Amesbury, there's always things we can add. Newburyport is our, right to our, just our neighbor here. They do a great job with their facades. The sort of storefronts is something that always stands out to me, that, when you think about the walk being interesting, you can picture certain stores down there and exactly what the front of the store looks like. It's sort of part of their branding. Each storefront sort of stands out individually and creates that visual interest. In Amesbury, we're getting better at this, but we have a lot of building owners who own the whole block. And so the whole front of the building is all one paint color and it blends. So there could be 5 different storefronts in there. And when you drive by or you walk by, they all look the same. Yeah,
so you miss it.
Right? So it's not as visually interesting. And so that is something that stands out to me in Newburyport. It is always an example that I go to. But one of the things Newburyport is missing And they are highly photographed and people, reference it a lot. And so you may not realize it until now you'll go back and look. They don't have any street trees in their downtown. So you look up State Street, there's again, highly photographed. You can picture all of the storefronts and their signs, but there's no trees. And there's a lot of benefits to having trees. There's a lot of people getting into this conversation about why walkable cities are important for our health and the environment. And of course, street trees are a huge piece of that.
Helps with flooding and stuff like that,
right? Right. Yep. Storm, runoff, retention, and things like that. And, just offsetting our impact to the environment, and it's for shade and cooling, and there's a lot of reasons. So Amesbury has great trees, but they obviously impact our brick sidewalks, and we lose them, and we have not been good about replacing them. So it's important for us to sort of turn our attention to the trees and recognize the importance that we have them, we should maintain them, and we want to keep them. So that's something else to think about, is your sort of the street trees down there. I was thinking too, I would just, I like to go to, Delray Beach in Florida is, to me, when the first time I went there, I walked away thinking that was the most pedestrian friendly place that I've ever been. I almost didn't notice the cars. The sidewalks are super wide.
Okay.
And there's a button to press to cross at every street crossing. Down there is sort of like main road.
Okay, got it.
And they're not all street lights, which is what we have. Like if there's a street light, there's a crossing. We're starting to add more of those pedestrian actuated, sort of flashing beacons. But they had one at every single street crossing.
So you said there were a lot of main streets, right?
They have like one main road, I think it's called Atlantic Ave or something. But at every single time you crossed a street, there was a button to press to let you cross.
So what was it that felt so walkable, or what was it about that community felt like that stood out?
Those sidewalks being the sidewalks were super wide. The restaurants were a little bit like Boston, where you see a lot of the facades of the restaurants, like the sort of garage door style windows, they rolled up and people could sort of sit outside or inside. They kind of were indoor outdoor seating, as opposed to in New England, a lot of us doing outdoor seating now are just sort of putting it outside in the parking lot, So they're built that way. Of course, it's Florida. So they had, sort of this indoor outdoor design. The sidewalks were really wide, and being able to cross the street everywhere you went with a light for you was, even where there wasn't a street light, they had just a metal pole, sort of your height with a button to press. It wasn't overwhelming for the infrastructure, but it just sort of prioritized the pedestrian.
Yeah, so you didn't feel like an inconvenience to the drivers, basically.
Yeah.
All right,
it was just sort of part of the culture that there were a lot of pedestrians there. Yeah, so that was really cool. There's some other towns near us that have really good landscaping and hardscaping in their downtown. I just drove through Kennebunk, Maine, and they have beautiful plantings. The flower beds are amazing. Yeah. And it's, again, really interesting. It also adds to safety, the places they have them. We have great planters, but they're sort of set back and they are planters. Theirs are right on the street edge, and a lot of them are right before a sidewalk. So it's called daylighting, where our not a sidewalk, a crosswalk, where our crosswalks are, a lot of times you'll see the sidewalk kind of bump out.
Yes.
Sort of gives you a little bit better of a sight line. You can see the pedestrians if you're in the car, and if you're a pedestrian, you can kind of look both ways and not worry about the parked cars. So they filled those edges with flowers. So they're bright and colorful, and it helps draw your attention to the corner.
Got it.
Where you would see a pedestrian.
Who do you think maintains that?
I don't know, but I was blown away. They were beautiful. I was like, take pictures. This is great. It was so nice. And so, little things like that. And I take, I look at things like that everywhere I go, and, sort of take bits and pieces of it and think, would that work in Amesbury? What about it would work? Where could we put it? And, I sort of filter it. Yeah. And it all becomes part of, this was one of the questions that the listener asked, was what's your vision for a walkable Amesbury? And I think, I sort of filter through those things as I see them. And the intention is to make it more desirable to walk than to drive, like you said, right? We want people to be able to conduct their daily lives without having to get in their car.
Right.
Or at least have it be as interesting to walk. And we just keep adding layers.
And I think we're doing a good job with public transportation too. So that makes it like you don't have to have a car if you live within downtown, especially right now. So I think, like you said, moving towards that, it's going to be perfect, that'll be even better.
Yeah, public transit is a big piece of it too. And for us locally, it's free right now. And there's more people riding, more people than there were even pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
By huge strides. But how do we sort of encourage more people to leave the personal vehicle behind, be able to take public transit? And one of the things Jeff says is, even every ride starts with a walk, right? It starts and ends with a walk. And so you might have to walk to the bus stop or walk out to the station. So when we think about things like that and we look at our development plans and we evaluate people who come to us with ideas, we sort of look at the center, we look at sort of the nodes and the hubs, and we should be working out from there when we're prioritizing sidewalks and bike lanes and things like that. But I would love to see more bike lanes. I would love to, add more. I look at downtown and think it's still not done. There's a lot to add down there, and we do have good bones. A lot of great things were done in the the 90s. When they made it all one way, and
I would love
that all
to
in there.
see the downtown become more connected to the trails.
Yeah.
That would be super.
Yeah.
The future looks bright.
Our trail is a great example of a place that's kind of boring to walk, right?
Yeah. So it being connected to the downtown would be like a huge plus. Yeah. But
It's a great example of a place that's like built for a walk, but it's kind of boring.
It's like there's not much art to look at while you're there.
Yeah.
It's bland.
There's nothing really interesting either, kind of in the woods.
Right.
And so that's a good place for us to sort of focus and think about, and maybe we think it's safe, but it's not lit. So you're not going to go there at night. Right. So there's sort of like, you could apply all 4 of these principles to that. And, that could look dramatically different with some investments.
Yeah. Well, good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And art. Let's add some art, please.
And art. Lots of art. I mean,
lots of art.
Yeah. And there's great examples of that on other trails and places with lots of public art. So walkable cities.
Yes.
So you feel like you've got some ideas for us. We've just talked about a lot of them, but things we can work on in Amesbury.
100%.
Things you're going to look for when you go to other cities.
Right.
Take notes.
Take pictures,
he's going to be texting me and sending me pictures.
I'll send them to you. Like, all right, here's what we need right here. I found it.
Yeah. Well, now I have somebody I can send my pictures and ideas to. So
perfect. And we'll just make it happen.
There's work for us to do, but I hope everybody goes out and learns a little bit more about walkable cities.
Yeah.
Look up Jeff Speck. Jeff just got huge shout outs from us all for our whole episode. And Project for Public Spaces, they're really cool too. They do a lot of placemaking stuff. And I'm sure there's so many other professionals out there, but that's our little bit of exposure and experience with the work that we're going to try to continue applying here in Amesbury. So.
Yes. And don't get it twisted. We do have a great walkable city.
And we have a walking score of
91.
91 out of 100, which is amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll, of course, the actual infrastructure and sidewalks that, we can't forget those things, and we will work on it. But
but we're getting
something to be proud of.
Exactly.
Something to be proud of.
I agree. Definitely.
That's great.
All right, walkable cities it is.
All right. Great
cheers on
conversation.
that. Yes.
Thanks for hanging out with us, and come back again soon.
Yes.